pounds at 5'10", and I did not look like Trump. Lies. Tell me lies, tell me sweet little lies. MAGA. Tell me lies, tell me lies. Alieze says, with only 4.8% body fat. A is in the building. She says, Grand Rising Ron and everyone. Yes, I didn't want to go in alone today. I have the wonderful G. She's here when I beckon her. I said, please. No. She knows as soon as I send it out, I'm like, hey, please come on. Here she is, Miss Gwendolyn.
I was like, of all the days, I'm trying to catch up.
I know you've been busy, and I haven't seen you in a while, and I haven't talked to you in a while. So I was like, okay, let me solve all of it in one swoop.
Well, yeah. Let me just
You've been
say,
busy, and you've been traveling. You've been doing your thing. You've been catching
I have
up.
been busy. I have been traveling. I have not. I picked up 6 minutes of news yesterday, and I was like, yeah, I'm going back to where I was because this ain't even worth it. Like, it's not even to come out of my piece. It ain't worth it.
No.
But yeah, I'll let you continue. Then I'll chime in when you're ready, so I can. But I mean, I have some great thoughts. But yeah,
you always have great thoughts. There's nothing I can talk about that you don't have a comment for.
That is very true. That is true. Okay, so let me give you an idea really quick of how, like, what's happening in the news and this past trip I took. So I had an opportunity to run to Shelbyville, Tennessee to visit the Nearest Distillery, right? Nearest Green Distillery. And I'm sitting there and I'm on the tour and I'm listening to the story of Nearest Green and Jack Daniels. And it really is a story of love. But what hits me the most, as Jeffrey Wright, who narrates this short film, he talks about how there are so many stories about enslaved people that have yet to be told. And so I start tearing up because I'm thinking, what else have we done as a people that has not received its credit yet, right? And you just look at all the things that we have brought to this country, and we kind of joke about it, but it's real. A lot of these ideas would not be here if Black people hadn't brought it. Right? We know that enslaved people could not have patents, could not get credit for what they created, and so their slave masters more than likely took those patents, and their families have been raking in dollars for years. For years. And so I got choked up and teared up. My husband got teared up too. Like, it just hits you to say there's so much out there that we have created. And then the fact that they make it seem as if Black people are lazy and can't do this and can't do that. The sheer fact that we're still here thriving and surviving moves your spirit, that you have to try to go and tear down all the things we have done. And even if you did that, you still couldn't do it. You still couldn't do it, right?
Yes.
So I'm sitting out here on their porch, and I just had to stop and reflect. Like, it just hits you differently when you think about it. And when you sit in the fact that you look at how, again, this whole deal with DEI, it's do what you want to do, but you can do whatever you want to do. At the end of the day, Black people are still going to be magnificent. We came to this country that way. Like, it's just how we operate.
And if I may interject there, they enslaved us because we were amazing.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you for correcting me there. It's one of those things where if more of us knew our history and we're in certain circles to be enlightened, I can only imagine what else we could do. I know what we're doing now. I know what we're doing now. And I understand that there is a play where classism and colorism comes into play in our community. I get that. And it's just, I think to myself, like, man, what could we do if we could get past some of the barriers that is separating us. I mean, I know for myself and my family, like we went as far back, like we know who our slave owners are. My mother and I figured that out years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you're just like, ugh. And when you read some of the documents that say, you know, so and so got, you know, 5 cattle and 2 Negroes, and you know, it's just, you know, seen as property. It
Yes,
just,
property.
you know, it can hit you. But then you see all the things that come with looking at your history, rediscovering what you just didn't even know.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So then we come to this guy. This guy here today.
The eraser. At least
The
they're trying to
eraser.
be one. Trying to be an
Yeah.
eraser.
An attempt to erase.
An attempt.
An attempt to erase, an attempt to downplay. I think about Black women who are very well occupying a lot of college classrooms, have
Mm-hmm.
multiple degrees behind their name. There are women that I know from my retail days who have multiple PhDs, extremely intelligent, creative women. And then they downplay like, she probably slept with somebody to get that, or what did you do to do this? You know, it's that kind of deal, because
It's
you know,
always yes.
before it was just them who could do it. It was just them. And then the moment you let us get a little bit of something, we come in and we start wrecking shop and showing up as we always have.
As
And then it's like, we can't
in
have that.
excellence. In excellence.
In excellence. We can't have that. We cannot
Like
have that.
I mention all the time when I went to the museum in South Carolina, the new African American museum in Charleston, and I was there during the weekend, or the weekend after the Obamas were there for the official week opening. I was there during the week, and I always say, I remember when that woman stopped me in my tracks after saying, they built this country on our backs. And then she pulled me to the side and said, wait, may I interject? And I said, sure. She goes, and it was a white woman. She says, they did not, yes, they did build the country on your backs, but they built the country on your intellect, on your knowledge. There would have been no rice fields if it wasn't for Africans from Angola. It would have been no the buildings and how they created and how they settled in places like Georgia and South Carolina, because those were swampy lands and they couldn't survive. The Europeans didn't know how to settle there. It was easy for them to settle up in the north, but it was very difficult for them to settle in the south. And they needed the Africans to teach them how to settle in those regions. Florida, all those marshy, hot places, they did not know how to survive in those climates. And it was the Angolans and the Africans, the first Africans that helped them learn all of that stuff. But then you and I talk about this all the time, Gwendolyn. This is a new stuff. You know, we're going in a different direction than I was planning for today. But we talked about this many times, how you go and you talk about people look at Egypt and how they want to always separate Egypt from Africa.
I was like, you do know you're in Africa, right? I don't know what you're looking at, but that's Africa. Go ahead and you need to go ahead and say it. It's Africa. Okay. The same way they talk about Colombia is like, and Colombia is in Harlem.
Yes.
All right. I don't care how you want to move
who
it.
said, did we have this conversation? Someone else I had the same conversation with about Colombia being in Harlem and how they want to separate.
They do.
They don't want to say Colombia in Harlem, but Columbia University is in Harlem.
It's in Harlem, the same way that Egypt is in Africa. It's this weird thing where I don't understand the mindset behind it, but it's almost something to the point of saying, well, if it's this, ooh, Gwendolyn, don't do it. I'm checking myself. If it's this well put together and sophisticated, surely can't be part of Africa because that's just not possible.
Yeah.
You know.
And
Yeah,
you think
yeah, it is.
about all of the, I mean, again, all of the knowledge of the world was in places of Africa. Timbuktu, the great library of Alexandria was in Egypt. These were this is Africa. And they said all of the knowledge that the Greeks learned, they learned it from the Egyptians.
Well, let me go back, and I see. I would love to have Miss Alieze. So going back to Nearest Green, like when people tell stories, we talk about that if you don't tell your story, someone else is going to frame it as they see fit. And so when people talk about Jack Daniels and Nearest Green, they made it appear as if Nearest Green was this enslaved man who helped Jack Daniels. The fact of the matter was, he was Jack Daniels' mentor. Nearest Green brought that. He brought that. You know what I'm saying? He's the one who created it to where people are like, I gotta have that whiskey from Dan Carr. I gotta have, yeah, that was him. It wasn't the other way around. And the picture that Fawn Weaver found, and you and I know this about photography and the way we crop photos.
Yes.
Right? Like we know that the paparazzi can make someone seem as if they're sitting side by side. Truly, they are not even on the same plane. It's all the way in how you frame the picture. So there's this picture where there is Jack Daniels and this black guy is off to the side. They're like, yeah. They're surrounding Jack. So the fact that the matter is, the entire photo shows that they're all surrounding Nearest Green. They are not surrounding Jack Daniels, who was actually standing up because he's a short man, kind of like Prince. But it was like, yeah, the way you frame a story.
Okay. Your signal's a little. Your signal's a little. Your frame is frozen, Gwendolyn. But
can make it fit
you'll come back on.
Certain idea of what was. The fact
we lost Gwendolyn. We lost Gwendolyn. There she's back. There she is. You froze up. You're freezing. You are
what
freezing.
happened there?
Oh, you are freezing. We were getting pieces of your conversation. Now you're back.
Was it me? I was like, what happened? You know, sometimes StreamYard has to catch up. And I'm like, was it me?
Your signal was a little bit behind. That's all. It couldn't keep up with all that wisdom you were pouring out.
And I'm hardwired. We talked about StreamYard and me being hardwired.
Yes.
Where did I leave off, Ron Foster? Where did I leave off? Let me know.
Well, you were saying about the cropping. That you can start back from where you talk about the cropping. As photographers, we crop out and we crop in to create messages.
You can crop a photo to make it look a certain way. And when they cropped this photo with Jack Daniels, they made it where he was the center of the photo, but the real photo shows that he was not the center of the photo. He was not. It was Nearest Green. He was the center of this photo. And so it goes back to, if you don't tell your story, someone else will tell it for you in the way that they see fit.
I love that, Alieze, and I was going to throw it because in conjunction with what you said, is that Alieze says, I have learned, and Alieze, you can pop on. I sent you an email. Alieze says, I have learned that you can crop a picture to show what you want people to see. That's right. A lot of times when you see our photos as photographers, we've cropped it. We've cropped it to tell the story. So there may be a lot of noise. Like, let's say that, someone's in a crowd and there's lots of busy stuff going on and colors, but we want to zero in to tell the story of that individual. We will crop it. And so you can zero into what we're trying to tell you. So exactly, you can create what you want to create. Exactly how the narrative can be created by those who are in control. And I think about this is one. There's two people on my LinkedIn page. Every day, they share Black history, and I learn so much every day from them. And then I repost it. I learn, repost, learn, repost. Anytime they post on my page on LinkedIn, I repost everything because it's like a land of discovery. I mean, they talk about all the tools, all the bolts, all the different little things, big things that we created along in history. And I always mention that, you know, because as slaves, you are always looking for ways to make your job easier and feel easier and work easier. You're always trying to find the best route to get it to work properly. And so necessity is the what? Foundation of invention. Because of necessity, you invent. And this is why Black people have invented so much. And if anyone has been enslaved or had a challenge of any kind, that challenge causes invention. So anyway, Alieze is in the building. And there she is. What's going on, Alieze?
Good
Oh,
morning.
Miss Wise One.
Yeah, as you know, this is my favorite kind of topic. Talking about all of these things. And just going back to what you were just saying about the necessity of invention. That's exactly why when I taught, I had my students do papers on African American scientists and mathematicians. Even though I was a math teacher, they still had to do a paper, a short paper, and do a presentation. They all it came with a presentation. Whatever they found, they had to do a presentation on. And it was so valuable to them to learn those things because most adults didn't know what they were learning. So we're just finding some of those things out. The one woman, and I'm sure this is who it is, Gladys, the one that invented the GPS.
Yes.
Actually, friends of some friends of mine. And we've actually gone to dinners together at their house.
Wow.
And just sitting there and not really knowing who she was at the time. Because so much of what they did was in alignment with being a part of the government. So you went from slave owners and everyone stealing ideas to them, to the government using their ideas for so much of the technology. So much of NASA's technology came from Black people, and I think it's so important that we not let people cover that up, and it's really our job to make it known and have our children find out about it. I recently gave my granddaughter an assignment because I didn't feel they were teaching her much of anything at school, especially as writing papers. I told, since she didn't know Charles Drew, I gave her the assignment to look him up, and she's going to have to type her paper up MLA style because that's what college is going to. Yes. But the point was so that she starts acquiring information about Black people who have done all these things. And the whole thing about Egypt, they want to turn it to Egyptology, but it's Africa. But that's to keep trying to whitewash who we are. And that's why I so loved it when Anwar Sadat was the president, because he was brown. A brown person. And so you understood the lineage of the Nubians.
Yes.
And so just knowing that history is what we need to know. We need to know that the street sweeper came up about and was invented by a Black person because, as you said, they got tired of sweeping that street with a broom.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
And it's amazing that people don't even understand things.
Cotton machine. The cotton machine. They got tired of holding with their fingers. So
things as simple as the brown paper bag.
The brown paper bag.
The paint. There's paint they did. The mailbox.
The mailbox
was a Black person that invented that. So that all of the refrigeration,
the inside of the light bulb. There'll be no light bulb. Yes, right.
Lewis Latimer, the refrigeration. The reason we have air conditioning and refrigeration is a Black man. So it's all of the shoe lasting machine. The shoe lasting machine was a Black man. So it's those
the list goes on and on. And the older I get, the more I learn. I'm like, and
it's important that we know that history. And one of the things that I'm making it a point of for myself, and Jazzy and I have talked about this before, is that my next thing is to start going and finding books that really go into details on the period of Reconstruction. Because we need to know that period. We need to understand that period of time where we were leading in a lot of areas. You built your own towns. That, of course, they burned a lot of them down. But you built your own towns. You had all these businesses. these people went from being denied education to be well educated and having doctors and hospitals in their own communities. And so I think that's a period of time we need to know that, and the legislation that came about during that time that
Yes.
everyone benefited from. And so,
Yes.
and so when I was at the museum, the National Museum of African American History and Culture on Saturday, that's exactly why I went live in the bowels of the museum, because we needed to know all of that part. And it doesn't start right. It doesn't start at enslavement, pre-slavery, and then it goes through slavery and then afterwards, so just to show people that there are parts in there that we need to understand and that we don't know, and we need to read about it. And it's going to be
so much great history,
because they're going to take a lot of stuff down, right? They control, basically they control information superhighway known as the internet.
Yes.
Control that they can erase anything in there at any point they want, right? So that's why you hear so many people now saying, get some books in your house.
Yes.
That those things aren't erased, so that you know what happened during Reconstruction. I think that it would be powerful for us to really look at that Reconstruction when basically our people were making something out of nothing.
Yeah. And became right after, during Reconstruction, Black people were in the Senate. They were senators. They were Congress. They were representatives for the state. They were passing laws, legislation. A lot of stuff that we have today in legislative bodies is because of the Black people that were in legislative positions during Reconstruction period. So,
and the reason we had nationwide free public school education was the legislation by a Black person during that period of time, during the Reconstruction. The time of Reconstruction. And that's because poor white people weren't a part of that education system either, because they couldn't afford it.
Yes.
It was rich white people who had access. So that's that. Even these colleges and universities now, it was about men, rich white men having that access. So that meant when they put that legislation out there and it got to be a part of it, it's so much of what Black people did in that legislation, a thankless job that benefited everyone. Everything that they're trying to use now against us are things that Black people fought for everyone.
For everyone.
Not just specifically for Black people, but for everyone to have equal access. They're now trying to use it against us, and as everybody knows, trying to erase stuff. But hey, none of that works. Benjamin Banneker was responsible for the design of Washington. Actually, absolutely. And Dr. Tachi, I actually taught my last 2 years in the classroom were actually at Benjamin Banneker High School. Predominantly Black school. Our top school in DC is still the top high school in DC. When I had my students do that paper, those students at that school had not been exposed to information on the legacy of Black people. And they were directly across from the school was at that time directly across from Howard University, one of the best resources in the world for them. I then had them write those papers. Those students were so empowered by what they learned if a history teacher one day misspeak on the term the real McCoy. And this was after they had done some of the presentations. So they came to me and they were like, Ms. Stallworth, I have to tell you, and they were seniors. He said, Mr. Spinner, that was the name of the teacher at the time, made this statement about the real McCoy. And I said, so what did you do? And they said, well, we told them the truth. We told them it was named because of Elijah McCoy. And because other people were trying to imitate his system and it didn't work as well, they started saying they wanted the real McCoy.
There you go.
Their white history teacher.
Yes.
And they felt so empowered by being able to do that I then knew that that's what I would always do as a teacher. And I started it before I started teaching. And that was motivated by my children's first grade teacher.
Wow.
Who had them do Black Invention t-shirts. And not only did she have them do it, she had them look up. She didn't just have them when she shared with them the inventions, she had the patent numbers so that if anyone challenged her on it, she could pull out the patent. And lo and behold, one white parent did. because they drew a picture of a toilet bowl. And he said, well, Crapper invented blah, blah. First of all, that seat was already in the outhouses in the South. But anyway, and so she had the patent that showed that a Black person invented the flush.
Yes.
Why
The
do you
flush.
think they invented the flush? They
The
got
whole
tired
tank
of cleaning
system. The
for
whole
pots.
tank system. Yeah.
So, but she was always on with the patents, and that left a whole lifetime of legacy. And even as an assistant principal, I hung their T-shirts in my office. So whenever a Black child came in front of me for disciplinary reasons, I told them about those inventions. I told them about the legacy of Black people and their legacy as Black people in America, because I think that's important.
I agree with you 100%. And like I said, I'm learning more about my history as a people now after, in my 50s and 60s than I learned when I was younger in high school and junior high school. And then the beauty of having so many educated Black people online, sharing stories, sharing history. We get to take it all in. And then when someone mentions something that they found in history, then it gives you the incentive to look it up, to go and dig deeper. It's the whole case of when you look at tapestries in Europe, and you look at the old tapestries at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and you see Black people everywhere. They're all in the tapestry, doing all kinds of things in the town, and helping the king, and doing this and helping that person, and you see them in the marketplace in these tapestries.
And you see them on the ceilings of the churches in all over Italy.
Yes, everywhere.
Every church has Black people in the ceilings of Italy.
But people forget that also, that even during those periods, they had indentured servants, and they were of all colors and all people, because of maybe they were in debt because they maybe it was gambling, who knows what it was, but their family got into debt, and then they had to pay it off, so they became indentured servants. And then, but again, this is my own philosophy, this is my own thinking of kind of like piecing history together. I have not seen the writings on it, or have not seen a book on it, not yet. Or maybe, I've heard people inclined to it. The Moors ruled Europe for almost 900 years, right? Now, America is only 248 years old, right? Think about this. America is only 248 plus years old. The Moors ruled over Europe, the southern Spain, Italy, parts of France, and even made some inroads inland too, as in teaching and knowledge, and the arches from the Moors, or from Africa, all the technology. Again, we always laugh about teaching them how to bathe.
How to bathe.
Yeah, teaching them how to bathe, using the aromas. But you have to think that not everyone was happy with these Moors that were ruling them. And it's no coincidence to me that as the Moors are pulling out of, some of the battles they're losing, they're retreating back, they're retreating out of different places in Spain, out of France, and moving back into Africa. They ruled over the Portuguese. I don't think there's no coincidence that as the retreat is happening, the Portuguese are now going to Africa. And remember, when the Moors ruled, they also brought in gold and all the minerals they had, and the diamonds and all that stuff. You had also in history where the other I forgot the richest African that came out of Mali, Musa, and how he bankrupt places by bringing gold everywhere. I mean, so this Africa has an amazing stories. But then you think about as they retreat, the Moors retreat back into Africa, and then the Portuguese go into Africa and begin the slave trade. But even in that, when you look at history, it's because they're African, or like they're going after the African resources. They want the African gold, they want the African diamonds, they want everything that Africa has. And then I think it's one of the Spanish guys, in the Spanish empire, said, wait a minute, we could make commodities of the people. Now we can make commodities of these Moors that used to be in our world. I mean, but then America once again. When America is the first, and when I learned this in when I studied history in college, it blew my mind when my teacher said, "Professor, give him his due, his title." He says, "Until America becomes part of the slave trade, until America comes onto the scene, slavery was never based on color. It was just the Africans or these people that we conquered. We wanted to get their minerals. We wanted to get their, but it was the American slave trade or the trade that comes to America that it becomes about Black people. That it's Black people that are evil. It's Black people. We need to, we're going to create their cattle, their possession, but they're not because they're Africans, but because they're Black. And that's when you begin to see that begins to infiltrate into the world. America,
right.
And not to sound anti-American, because I'm sorry, but at least you talk about the caste system. We talk about Germany gets its ideas from America.
Yes,
America is an interesting instrument of horror throughout history since America came on the scene. There's always been slave trades all around the world for generations, but it was never based on color. Anywhere in the world, the Greeks had slaves. The Africans had slaves. Everybody had slaves, but it was not based on color. It was the Americans that made it about color.
Yeah. And it was the Americans that made it so that you would always be a slave.
Always be a slave.
And that it's Americans that decided that it was determined by the mother, right?
Yes.
Especially after they weren't able to buy slaves, so they could impregnate women and have them and keep having slaves that way. So America came up with a lot of things that other people adapted to their pieces. And then, of course, when they decided that, hey, that doesn't make sense, we need to stop this, America's like, we're going to keep it going.
Yes.
So, because they had become rich off of it.
Yes.
Off of the expertise and the intellect of the enslaved people that they had with all the crops, the sugar, the cotton, all those things that they became rich off of, tobacco, everything. So that's why they kept having it. And, as you were talking about history, my husband was a history major, but what's interesting, he was at Cleveland State. So there are lots of gaps in his history around our people. And I figured out, and I had this conversation with him on Saturday. I said, so for people during that time to really be in depth with history, they had to basically become historians, and they had to pick something to study so you understand the fabric. And so when you mentioned fabric, when we left, we went to Union Station, and there's this new store in there. They're trying to do something else. So we walked this one store, and this woman had these flags, these fabric made flags that she did, a Black woman. So I started looking at them, and I ended up, there's a long story. I won't tell that story right now, but I know I now possess one of those. Right? So where the stars would be, she has like part of the slave, the inside of a slave ship where the stars would be. And it's denim and other fabrics that make up the stripes. It's no red, it's no green and black, none of that stuff. It's blue, white, and the back, that fabric that she used on the particular one I got is burlap. And I was telling my husband the reason I was so excited about it and so annoyed him until he agreed, but was because of the burlap, the use of burlap in there. And I told him, I said, because of the history with burlap and enslaved people. He didn't know what I meant. So I went through and I said, so burlap is one of the fabrics that they gave enslaved people to make their clothing out. If you've ever seen or touched burlap, it's very rough fabric. So they gave all the rough fabric.
Ooh, that's
So since she used the backing of her piece was burlap, I told him it meant so much to me to have a piece that depicted basically it was like our history in one piece. It was the history from being captured in here to how they treated you once you got here, making you wear that rough fabric. I ended up talking to the artist because I went to get it the next day. This is a story, but I ended up being connected with the artist who did it, and I was telling her what really captured me was the use of burlap. She said, it must have been. She said it was totally subconscious. I did not go and intentionally use it. It ended up being the fabric that I chose. And when I talked to her about the burlap, she thanked me. She said, as I move, I will continue to think about things like that. Because we need to know our histories. We need to know why things can be, why something would invoke an emotion from me, being from Alabama and having known some of that history previously, why that piece resonated so powerfully, and why it told a story that people who are doing lots of art with flags, they are nice, but this is by far the most powerful piece I've ever acquired. Probably one of the cheapest pieces I've ever acquired. And it came framed, right? So, and I'll tell you, it's cheaper. It was less than $500. Fully framed, hand stitched onto this burlap.
Wow.
And with all of our history from being put on that boat to how we were treated. And there's actually some words on there that seem like they're pieces from probably a slave that she has written on the white panels that are in there.
Wow.
You know, we have to know our history.
But I mean, that's the beauty of the history. I know Jazzy says the Portuguese were the catalyst that introduced the racial construct into the world, and Americans ran with it. However, America made it what it is today. The racist backing, the racist bigotry, everything being about black and white versus black. Yes, the Portuguese may have kind of like hinted in some of their the people, but it was the Americans that made it a global phenomena and changed the whole construct of slavery.
And to add to that, when you go into the museum, it explains that to you clearly. It happened in the Chesapeake Bay.
Yes.
Down there when they noticed that indentured servants, white indentured servants, indigenous people, and enslaved people were coming together. They were mating, they were doing all these things, and they realized that the people who owned the slave, the rich people who owned the enslaved people, realized they if they ever really truly got together, they were outnumbered.
Yes.
So they had to interject and
division
the idea of race to the indentured servants and let them know that they were different and that they were somehow, even though they were poor, they were somehow better.
Yes.
And it's actually, that history is actually captured on the walls of the museum.
And it's practiced, and it's in the mindset, etched in the mindsets of white
Correct.
Americans to this day.
Which is why they voted for this clown who did the stuff that you started out talking about.
Yes.
Full circle.
Full circle. Speaking of the clown, I wanted to share one thing, and then we're going to go into our lesson. But I want you guys to be aware of what's happening here. Trump to the U.S., there is no rule of law. What might he try next? Illegal arrest or deportations of American citizens by David Corn. And this is, man, if something doesn't give you a little chill in your bones of where we're heading, we already knew. Those of us, our community already knew this. So this is not something that's new to us. We are totally aware. In the future, April 14th, 2025 may well be recognized as a monumental day in U.S. history. That is, of course, if there is honest history in the future. Because this is the day that President Donald Trump sent a clear message to the nation. There is no rule of law in the United States. It happened in the Oval Office. Trump was hosting El Salvador's authoritarian president, Nayib Bukele, who was referred to himself as a dictator, And an obvious issue hovered over the session. The Trump administration wrongfully deportation of Maryland's resident Kamar, how do you say his name? Abrego Garcia to El Salvador, where he has been locked up in the country's notorious Sacat mega prison for the last 3 weeks. The U.S. government has conceded that Abrego Garcia was rounded up and shipped off with other immigrants to El Salvador by mistake. Yet, at this tit-a-tat, both leaders made clear they intend to do nothing to redress this act of profound injustice. Never has such a toxic brew of cruelty, absurdity, and danger been on display in the White House. Trump and his crew were saying that the U.S. government could mistakenly apprehend a resident, ship him to El Salvador to be imprisoned, possibly for life in brutal conditions, and not have to take any steps to undo this violation of due process and decency, even after courts, can we say all 9 court justices, SCOTUS, all 9, even the Trump supporters, hello, we don't get Clarence Thomas on the side of anybody for justice. And he says, even after courts instructed it to do so, their message, the law doesn't matter. We can do what we want. This is authoritarianism. And it's written by David and reports on his historic justice in the link in their bio of Mother. This is their great page, Mother Jones magazine. This, y'all, but we all knew this was coming. Yeah. And we know they're working towards it. They're working towards this.
Do you have the hot mic conversation where he talked about the possibility of doing that with other American citizens?
I do have it. I'm going to while you talk, I'm going to bring it up.
He could build like 5 more facilities.
Yes.
And he said, "Oh, I have the land." Those reported those puppets inside there laughing because of that. And that's the problem. Like they don't think it can happen to them.
Yes.
And when it starts happening to them, and they send you over there, and some people like, well, the court should do something, the military should do. I want people to understand this is supermax. If they ever know what supermax is in the U.S., these prisoners like supermax. You're not just gonna go over there and break in. That's not how it's gonna work. So And they both know that they have, he could say today, send that man back home, and he would send him back home.
Here we go. And oops. This is slow. Sorry. Hold on a second. Let me see if it come up. Why is it slow? Okay. Let me see here. It's not. It's not. It's for some reason it's slowing. I got too many windows open. Hold on a second. Let me close another window. Let me close some things out, and then we could get there. Okay. Hopefully, I may be using too much power here. Okay. Let's try it again. This. Okay. I'm gonna go back.
You have the sound on?
No. It's frozen. Okay. Here we go.
Oh.
It doesn't seem to.
Well, there's a second sound button at the bottom.
Yeah. There. Oh, thank you, dear.
Homegrown criminals next. Yeah. I said homegrowns are next. The homegrowns built. You got to build about 5 more places. Yeah, that's fair. All right. It's not big enough. No, yeah, come on. So this is a much different office. The mandate, the people wanted to change everything, and they wanted. They demanded. They love you. They love what you do. You know, I'm not feel supportive. I want them to, homegrown criminals next. Yeah. I said homegrowns are next. The homegrowns built. You got to build about 5 more places. Yeah, that's fair. All right.
How disgusting is that?
Yeah. And the fact that, go ahead, Gwendolyn.
Well, okay, so people in this echo chamber, right? Mm-hmm. We already know about this. We know about, like, people ask why there are no Black people out there fighting and marching, because we have pretty much done our time putting our Black lives and bodies on the line for everybody else. Right. And it's like I said, until the pain of remaining the same becomes unbearable, nothing changes. You're going to have to snatch up some people, some of y'all cousins, some of y'all best friends here, there, and the other. They have to be snatched up for someone to say, holy smackers, this is awful. Because as long as it happens to an other, they can care less. And it's awful. It's really awful that, we're out here, we're toting this whole, we're Christians and we're here for this, that, and whatnot. And yet and still you voted for a guy who is hate on two legs, just like walking hate, walking privilege. And you don't think it matters because, well, it hasn't happened to you yet, but something has to happen to you, which is also awful for you to even care. That's not what this country supposedly was built on. Right? Like, that's not it. But it's disgusting and it's blatant, and there's not a blink of an eye, because people are like, well, it just can't happen. Something needs, and I know it sounds awful, something needs to happen. Something really bad needs to happen before people actually start waking up and getting themselves out and doing something. Because until then, they're going to keep pushing the ledge. You know what it reminds me of? That game on The Price is Right. You know what I'm talking about? How the guy is going up the hill. You know what I'm saying? They have to say, that's too far. That's too far. Yeah, it hasn't gone far enough. When you can sit in that office and make those comments and joke about
and laugh about it and laugh about the cruelty
and send people over because they're beating people in the head and whatnot, you let out a whole host of people who try to run a coup on the government.
Absolutely.
So the deal is, if you don't agree with us, we'll just pick you up and ship you off. That's what the message is. You can't write anything about them. You can't go against this. You can't. At some point, you're going to have to fight for these rights. At some point, you're going to have to fight for them. Until then, I'm going to sip on my whiskey and learn this new line dance.
Because there's another clip where he talks about, if you beat somebody with a bat or you did this. And what came to my mind is, but you freed criminals from that January 6th who beat people with police officers with fire extinguishers, flag poles, tasers, and all kinds. You did all of these things.
Flag poles,
sprayed them with bear spray, but they were okay to release. But like you said, people on his side. So anyone and that man is not the only innocent person that's down there. There's a makeup artist.
There's lots of them
they took down there. So what's happening to him? Because he was from the LGBTQ community.
And this is just my belief. I know now it is starting to circulate. I said this last week. I think he's unalived. I think some of these people are unalived.
I agree.
And they can't bring them back. And that's why they are doing what they're doing, because these people are no longer with us.
And that's how I put nothing past any of these people at this time. And I think, you know, it's like I keep going back to where I share with people just things to read, where, you know, this is very much like what's in Parable of the Sower. Where they start arresting people, putting these electronic collars around their neck so they can't get out, and doing whatever they wanted to do. And so if you think about this man over there, the U.S. actually pays him.
Yes.
To house these people. It's not like he just holding people over there and he's doing it at his own cost. They were paid millions of dollars for this.
Yep.
So it's not like you paying for them to be housed. So
do you know how much it's costing? Do you know what the alleged price of each inmate? $20,000
each one. So they said we paid as much as $6 million.
That's insane
for people. And how they make them take off their shirts and everything to show their tattoos. That's all staged. They make them take off their shirts like that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and this guy is a brutal dictator from El Salvador.
Yeah.
He has arrested 85,000 of his own citizens. And some are nowhere, because once you go into this prison, you're nowhere to be found. No one even knows that these people are still alive when they go into that prison. Because once you're in that prison, you never come out.
And they know who they have in there. They know who, and you know, and we have to understand how prisons can work as well, right?
Yes.
You have certain prisoners in there who, to have certain comforts while they're in prison, can be used against other in prison people.
Yes.
To do harm to them.
Yes.
So all of those things are things that are happening down there.
Yep.
And it's what Gwendolyn said, and it's always, they have to feel it. I've never been in a situation that every time I've had to speak with white people in the arena, I had to make a connection to what's going to happen to them and their children, for them to finally get it and they finally receive it. Because as long as it was just them looking at it's just the other people, and not us, then that's the problem. They're marching now but even though they voted for him, because they thought it was just going to be the other people, and not them, the other Hispanics, not them, because what they failed to hear was they said criminals. You assumed that it was violent.
Yes.
Right. That woman, when she came in, Pam Bondi said, if you're in this country illegally, you are therefore a criminal.
Yes.
So you had them arrest a man yesterday at his immigration hearing. He was arrested at his hearing.
It's like someone said, I think it was Brian Cohen said on Brian Taylor said Tyler, sorry, Brian Tyler. He said just look no further than 1932, 1930s, Germany. Exact same things happening. Because once they go for the immigrants, they go for the people that are, again, the low on the totem pole that they think, and then they work their way up. Right. And before you know it, it's you and first is your neighbor, and then it's you.
Yeah, that's Brian Create Young's favorite thing is to talk about that piece. You ignore it until it becomes you. Yeah. And I think people like us, we're looking at it and saying, we see it. We know where it's going.
Yes.
And people need to do something about it. But at the same time, we also know what our limitations are. We have to be realistic about that, right?
Yes.
So, and we know that the people who are out there now have to be the people out there.
Yes.
Because we've been out there before.
That's exactly right.
We've been there. They have to, this is their battle. I said it when your friend got upset with me. This is their fight.
This is their fight, my friend.
Yes,
watch it, girl.
It is what it is. It is what it is. It's awful. I keep saying it's awful. The fact of the matter is we should never get to a place where something has to happen to us physically, mentally, emotionally to actually care about what happens to our neighbor. For all the talk about religion, God is love. So if it happens to you, it's happening to me, and I don't want to happen to you either, right?
Right.
So I don't have
And
to see some of this stuff happen for me to be active. It doesn't have to go that
yes,
far for me.
Right.
exactly. And also, what is that? What does Jesus talk about? Your neighbor. Love yourself. Love your neighbor as thyself. Right. So that's
But
what
you
I'm
got
always
guys
blown
out here,
away with these so-called Christian
putting
movements that are in it,
mansions
but
on
these are not
fire. I
real
haven't heard
people.
about them yet. I mean, I'm
No.
sure he's going to El Salvador, surely.
Ugh.
Yeah, we'll wait. Look, let's see. Because he set
I
the
mean,
governor's mansion on fire. They tried to kill the people in their sleep.
right?
That's a terrorist act. So is he just automatically just gonna go down?
Well, it's he's a white man, so it's not going to happen. I mean, this is where we are in this country. But again, I bring this up so that we can be alert, because we already know in this community, and also, but there may be people that may be viewing us for the first time. And if you are, make sure you hit the likes, and if you are a part, here in this community. But if you're in this community, you haven't hit the likes, well, shame on you.
Right.
Okay, but again, it's important that we know what's going on. And this is really, I mean, for the president to say that just outright, he's already got the plans already drawn up.
But he
They
also said he's
already
been working on
worked.
it.
Yeah.
He also said he's been working on that with Pam Bundy.
Yes, he
said
did. That's
He
it.
said
That's what I
Pam
mean.
and I have been working on this.
Yes, and we're
So-
trying to find out the laws.
Right. Trying to find out the laws.
These
And
people
it-
are evil.
Yeah.
Evil as evil can be.
And my husband and I had an interesting conversation because he read this article. And the author, he wrote this, and he said, history has always been centered around men. And I told him, I said, I need the author and any authors at this point writing articles to be more nuanced than that. He needed to say white men.
Exactly.
We
The
need
article.
to start saying who exactly we're talking about. We can no longer say Americans just to be Americans unless we talk about everyone. But about white people, we need to put a handle in front of all of it, just like they require for everyone else, because we need to be real specific about who we're referring to. We cannot continue to give them the privilege of not having to own who they are.
Yes.
We can't keep giving them that privilege. And I think that people writing articles, people saying stories, most white Americans supported him.
Yes. 53%. I will never forget the number.
Yep,
And
numbers don't lie.
53% of white Americans voted for this foolishness. And now a lot of them are crying and saying, I can't believe this is happening. Like there was a gentleman on his videos going viral. He's saying, I can't believe you guys I lost my company because of the terrorists. I can't afford to have a company, and my company's falling, and you people are laughing at me because I was part of MAGA and blah, 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 blah. And people are like, dude, FO, grab a drink. Grab some popcorn.
He said I had problems the last time. I still voted for him, and I probably vote for him again. So that's that has nothing to do with us.
They will do it again. That's what's the crazy part. They will do it again. And but anyway, we're gonna get to our lesson. But tomorrow is our Wednesday. I think we're gonna have water cooler tomorrow. I don't have a guest tomorrow, so we will have our water cooler chat, so we can just talk about whatever we want to talk about. And I always like when we do our water cooler days because we just know how to chat here. We know how to communicate. This is a communication community.
Well, I share on Thursday at 7:30 live on Instagram. I will be having a conversation with Tanya Whittemeyer. She's a gallery owner in Industry City.
Oh,
I actually have a conversation with a gallery owner. I'm getting back to my addicted to artness. So
lovely. And I'm glad that you're doing interviews and talking and sharing.
Yes, we're gonna do that. So I'll have her on Thursday at 7:30.
Oh, we will be joining you
to reboot. You gotta reboot this stuff. We said we got to go live life. We got to do life.
We will. And Dr. Tachi, you're gonna be on the panel tomorrow, right, Dr. Tachi? Calling Dr. Tachi for the panel tomorrow. And but let's go into some photography. Thank you guys. Thank you, Gwendolyn. Thank you, Alieze. I love y'all. You make you make the conversation more colorful and grand. Love y'all. Okay, this time it is time for mastering foreground composition. But before we go into the lessons, I definitely got to do my advertisements, right? One is, let's pop this in here. And if you are here, make sure you go to my website, go to ronlewisphotos.com and sign up for the email. So that way, if I put out a newsletter or just want to stay in communication with you or new things are happening, I can send it to you by email. And also, we're not so reliant upon these platforms because we may not have these platforms in the future. So let's use them. Let's make use and get out and get onto the newsletters of all the people that we love and care about, as in online and social media. Also, I am an event photographer. I do event photography. And today, I want to also, again, as usual, thank our Patreon members for what they do here and what they bring to the table and supporting this platform. And also, one of our big sponsors, Rolling Clouds, a cigar company, and they are one of our biggest supporters. And since this is a lesson day, and this is our Tip Tuesday, photograph your world, home, work, or play, virtual basic photography 101, fun tutoring using your camera model, creating instructions, and planning at your pace. Learning at your pace. Available in person tutoring in New York City, or basically, guys, I do this on virtually, so we can teach you photography virtually. Okay, now let's get to the lesson. Mastering foreground composition. How did this come up? Last week, we were doing our lesson and we talked about, and then we saw a photo and we talked about and looked at that, how foreground works. And we said, look, and some of you guys mentioned about it. And we said, okay, you know what? Next week, let's talk about it, because foreground was going to really help you in photography. If you can learn this skill of composition, it's going to make your photography look like you are a professional, because foreground is so important in framing your subjects. They always say a great photo usually has good foreground, sharp subject, and some background. If you can get those in balance, you could have an amazing photograph, especially for we event photographers. When I do event photography, the photos that I get the most like love and glee and who and ahs over are the ones that I use the technique and composition of foreground. Foreground is so important when you are doing event photography. So here we go. Let's talk about it. Foreground composition is a fantastic topic for us today. It's a technique that can transform a photograph by adding depth, context, and visual interest. Here are ways for our community to use this composition. Want to make your photos pop? Foreground composition is your secret weapon. By incorporating elements in the foreground, like textured rocks, winding paths, or even blurred objects, you can create a sense of depth and lead the viewer's eye into the scene. Think of it as layering your image to tell a richer story. For instance, you see this guy getting his hair cut, but in the right-hand corner, there's some foreground. So what does foreground do? It makes you feel like you are looking over the barber's shoulder. It makes you feel like you are a part of the picture. It makes you feel like you're in it, not just viewing it. Foreground composition is a powerful tool in photography that can elevate your images in several ways. And here are 5 key reasons why it's important. Adds depth and dimension, as we mentioned. Foreground eliminates creative layers. I say, right? Foreground foreground elements create layers in your image, making a two-dimensional photograph feel three-dimensional. This enhances the viewer's sense of immersion and spatial awareness. Like this. This is the photo that caused us to have this conversation this week. We had this one last week, and then I showed you some work and what I was photographing. But see the head of this person on the left side. It makes you feel like you are a part of the scene, like you are getting like a secret look of it. You are a part. You're like, oh, I'm here. There you go. There you go. Guides here's another reason. Guides the viewer's eye. Strategic use of foreground elements can lead the viewer's gaze toward the main subject, creating a visual pathway that enhances the storytelling of your image. G says, I often look for the foreground elements before composing my image. That's from a photographer in the building. That's from a fellow photographer in the building. Yes, right. We look for it. When we are doing photography, especially, again, I mentioned as an event photographer, I am looking for things that I can feel like I'm behind and I'm hiding behind. And in a sense, I'm usually doing that anyway because I don't want to be in your face as the event photographer. I like to blend into the scene. Usually I'm wearing black. So that people don't see me. Like I would never wear all these stripes as a event photographer. I'm wearing black so I can blend in, but I'm usually hiding behind columns. I'm usually behind bushes. I'm behind trees. I'm behind books. I'm behind different things. And then I use some of those objects because they match what I'm trying to tell, how I'm trying to tell the story. Like, here's an example. Like you see these flowers. Now you can see there's a slight haze. That's because the photographer is focused on the beautiful purple plants there. But in front of the photographer, between that focus point and the photographer's camera, there are also more of those ragweeds, what you want to call them, brush. And by focusing on the ragweed, the ragweed, he's also using, or she is using the purple to blend into the foreground to make you feel like you are in that bush or you're like among all of the weeds looking at these couple of weeds sticking up, right? Roland, another photographer, says those foreground elements can also frame your subject. We're going to go there. Provides context. Foreground elements can offer clues about the environment or setting, enriching the narrative and helping the viewer connect with the scene. Right? You connect with the scene. Like here, like Anthony just said, you can use it to frame your subject. You see here, there's foreground all around the bunny. All around the bunny is a foreground. Foreground can be used to frame your subject. Can y'all see that? Look at that bunny. Isn't the bunny cute? But it's more cute because it's framed nicely. Look at the softness around the bunny or the hair. Creates balance and harmony. Incorporate foreground elements can balance the composition, ensuring the image feels cohesive and visually appealing. Like that bunny, how beautiful that bunny looks in the green. It makes it more appealing. Here's one that we use. Here's a foreground. Woman's looking, but now you take the person that's sitting in front of the person, use the head and let it blur out and it makes it soft also. Look how soft. And then you get the sharp image, right? It anchors the photo. Also, enhances emotional impact. Foreground elements can evoke emotions by adding texture, scale, or intimacy to the scene, making the photograph more engaging and memorable. Look at that. Look at that. Using the lights. Using the lights. You're focused on the individual. How do we do that also if you're using remember we learned these techniques 2 weeks in a row. Make sure if you're using your smartphone that you use your finger to focus on the person's eye, right? Tap the eye. The camera on your smartphone is going to focus on the eye, and then it's going to blur out everything around it and create foreground. If you use foreground, that's how you get that nice softness. Take your finger, pop it on your subject, and then watch your camera automatically adjust the focus point, and then the edges around the subject will become soft. Now, we do something similar with the big cameras. The big cameras, we go in, we can change what we call our f-stops. So we can, the larger the f-stop number, the clearer or the more clear it is as you go out from the center of where the subject is. So we bring our f-stops down so that way everything else around the frame starts to soften up, right? So when we have these little big guys here, we use our f-stops. We use our f-stops to create those beautiful foregrounds. Anthony says, those battery-powered lights are a fun, cheap photo hack. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. They are a hack to make your photo look good. Also brings lighting onto your subject. And they only cost about $5, $10. Yeah, at the craft shop. Here you go. Another picture. A little bit of foreground. This one you have a good foreground, you got good background. And in the middle is the paintbrush. That is the subject. Again, the young man, he's studying using the computer, but they use, the photographer used the back of another computer, the monitor, as a foreground to frame the young man, right? To frame the young man. I love these. I do this all the time when I see people doing their selfies as an event photographer. I'll run behind them and start taking pictures of the pictures being taken of the person, of the subject. So you get nice foreground to kind of indicate what's going on in this picture. And then you actually have the clear subject. So by focusing on the subject, making the subject sharp, the thing that's in front of you automatically becomes soft. Becomes soft. Conclusion. Try this. Look for objects in the foreground that complement your subject next time you're out shooting. Experiment with angles. We talk about that all the time here. And focus to see how they shape your composition. There you have it. There you have it. You can do this. This week, when you pick up your camera, I give you these. Every week I give you these tips. You should be going on an assignment and practice. You just learned something that's very valuable. I guarantee you're going to really love your photos if you start to use your foreground. You're going to really love your pictures when you start using foreground. Okay, guys, what did you learn? I gotta ask you. Put it in the comment box. One thing you learned today. One thing you learned. Put it in the comment box. I know some of you may be driving. If you're driving, don't do it. But if you have a free hand, put in the comment box what you learned today on the topic of mastering foreground. Jazzy says, framing, like we saw the hair, we saw the bunny, we also saw the young man at the computer. Good framing comes from good foreground. Right? Good foreground. What else? Is Jazzy the only one that's awake in the class? Is Jazzy the only one awake in the class? Don't say it isn't. Say it ain't so. Okay, Jazzy says, that was really interesting because I didn't think about it in that way. See? That's why we here. That's why. Well, I hope. Look, we talk news, we talk a lot of stuff. But at the end of the day, I want you to become better photographers. Here it is. Aya says, foreground adds depth and dimension to photos. Thank you, Aya. Thank you. There's some folks that are alive. They are alive. Okay. Now, I'm going to also transition this conversation to, I want to share this with you because you'll see that on the Patreon page this week, and on our Tip Tuesday, this is a photo I took. You see how I'm using foreground? You see how I'm framing the horse? This photo was taken while I was in North Carolina in the mountains, in Asheville, North Carolina, the year before they had the floodings and stuff. But this horse was there, and I wanted to give you that feeling like you were peeking in with me. But if you want to know where this is on the Patreon page. So you can find this on the Patreon page. Find this where on the Patreon page, and you'll see all of it broken down. You'll see here, this is at me working. I'm working on a project with a client. So I am an event photographer. That's what I do. So my client, I'm photographing. So you see how I make this person, I make the event come alive by using foreground and connecting them together. But yet she's the one, she's my subject. Why? Because as an event photographer, I am trying to capture emotions. I want smiles. I want laughters. I want my clients, when they post these photos, and my clients want their constituents or people that did not make it to the event to feel the event in every photo that I photograph for them. Because it does them no good for me to take photos just like, just a person. They want me to isolate expression, emotion, but I do it better with foreground, right? So you can read this in your Patreon. You already got this at 1:00 in the morning. Also, there's some reference sources on this one. So you can go to some of these stories, lessons that are that have been, because this was I call it sourced. So I got a lot of information from other sources to put this together. But here you have it. There you have it. guys, this is why you are part of the Patreon community. If you're not, become one. If you are a free Patreon member, become a paid Patreon member. I'm using April as Patreon month, so I would love to see more people support what we do here, because it costs money to be here. So become a Patreon member, or if you are a free member, support and step it up. I think it's worth $3, at least $3 a month. I think it's worth $3 a month, what we do here, at least. Okay, just saying. Anthony says foreground can either tell the story or turn the story into a mystery. Ooh, I like the way you said that, Roland. Yes, right? Foreground can either tell the story or turn the story into a mystery. Janice says, thanks, Ron. Okay, guys. If you enjoyed this, put some hearts up. If you enjoyed it, put some hearts up. That's an easy one to do. But we're going to end it here. It is time to let you guys go. Most of our shows are between 12 and 1 o'clock. It's between 12 and 12:30. So we in around those times. As long as I get you out by 12:30, I'm a happy person. And so, guys, have a great day. I hope you take out your smartphone today. If you're in the office, take a picture of one of your coworkers behind the cubicle and just use the cubicle as foreground. Or if you're out in the street and you go out for lunch and you see people walking, kind of like frame them around some tree branches, some bushes. Or if you're sitting at the table getting ready to have a meal, you can take a picture of them, but use the glass and the plates as foreground. Go on a foreground scavenger hunt today and this week as you improve your photography. Okay, guys, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you tomorrow. We're going to have a great time tomorrow as we normally do, but guys, enjoy your day. Love you, and thank you for joining us. Thank you so much. Hello, and thank you for joining us today. Make sure you hit the like, the subscribe, and leave a comment on this video. I would love to hear from you. Thank you again. Until I see you next time.